Patch 13.14 is upon us with some nerfs, some buffs, and an insane amount of other changes too, including the new champion Naafiri and a new game mode. Starting with nerfs, we have Hecarim with his W losing 10 flat bonus armor and magic resist. Next we have Jax, whose E will now have a 1 second longer cooldown at all ranks, and his ultimate will now cost 100 mana up from 50. Following this we have Karthus, whose Q will now deal slightly less damage early, and his E restores less mana per kill. Next we have Kindred, who is gaining 30 base health and 3 armor, however her Q will deal 10 less damage and have a 1 second larger cooldown. Following this we have Milio, who is losing a massive amount of damage on his passive and a good chunk of the movement speed on his E. Next we have Rek'Sai, whose W is losing 5 flat damage and the E is losing a massive amount of damage. Following this we have Rel, who is losing 3 flat armor. In addition, her passive will now steal only 2% of armor and magic resist from the target, with it now being capped at a total 10% of their armor and magic resist stolen. And the final nerf goes to Rengar, who is losing a small amount of health regen and the Q's critical hits won't hit quite as hard. The first buff goes to Aatrox, who is actually losing a small amount of the base damage on his Q, but it will now scale harder with AD. In addition, as he levels up, this will start dealing even more damage to minions. Next we have Diana, whose W shield will now be stronger and the orb damage will now scale better with AP. In addition, her E will also scale better with AP. Following this, we have some very good quality of life changes to Lissandra. Firstly, her passive will now keep chasing slightly longer and they will now chase into brushes, with the additional effect of course that the enemies can now see them in brushes, and other fog of war. In addition, her Q will now slow all enemies hit rather than just the first enemy hit and feel smoother in general, as it will now cast from where she finishes casting it rather than where she was at the start. And a massive, incredibly fun change on her is when she uses ultimate on herself, she'll now get healed for 10 health more, but where this heal only used to scale with 25% AP, it now scales with a massive 55% AP, which should massively help her in her role of the engage mage. Next we have Shaco, whose Q will now scale better with AD and also deal more critical damage. And in addition, Prowler's Claw will now work with his ultimate clone. Following this we have Shyvana, whose Q now scales better with AD and makes her next attacks have increased attack speed. However, this ability will have a 1 second longer cooldown. In addition, her E's percentage health damage will now also scale with AD. Next we have Volibear, whose passive will now scale better with AP and his W now has a better execute as it's leveled. Following this we have Xerath, who is losing a chunk of mana and his passive cooldown will now be 16 seconds. However, every time he kills a unit this is lowered by 2 seconds and he can now proc it on towers. In addition, his ultimate is being massively buffed, where it will do slightly less damage but he gets an additional use of the ultimate at all ranks. And if he hits a champion with the bolt, it increases the damage of all of his next procs. And finally we have Zyra, with her passive being slightly adjusted. Her W now gives her 2 seeds when it's leveled up for the first time, and her ultimate will now proc 16 times a second rather than just 4 times a second. We also have some item changes, with Axiom Arc's ultimate refunding now scaling with lethality. Gale Force's cooldown is now going up from 90 seconds to 120 seconds. Infinity Edge now gives 5 less AD but makes crits hit 10% harder. Prowler's Claw now grants 18 lethality. Randuin's Omen now reduces crit damage by 25%. Shojin now costs 100 gold less and gives 50 more health. Spirit's Visage grants 60 magic res. Shiv now grants 30% attack speed and the damage now scales with levels. Sterax now costs less and gives 50 more health. Triforce has been slightly nerfed. Ghost now lasts for 15 seconds but no longer is extended by takedowns. And red and blue buff now scale with levels. Other than this, we have the new champion Naafiri coming out soon and the new 2v2v2v2 game mode.